Dentists billing Medicaid for ambulance runs that were never medically necessary and services that were never done.
I ran a legitimate company, and every claim we submitted was based on the services we provide.
Once is a mistake. Twice is suspicious. Dentist Damian Anugwom did this across hundreds of Medicaid claims and left a billing trail that reads like a signed confession. He would not get the chance to finish that sentence.
Billing codes show utter unbundling on hundreds of claims. The records do not support any
I
of
want
them.
my attorney present before I respond to anything about our billing practices. I am not.
Within 90 minutes, agents from the Texas Attorney General's Medicaid Fraud Control Unit would walk out of his Sugarland home with 7 banker's boxes of billing records, 3 external hard drives, and the corporate ledger for Union Healthcare Services. 6 years of inflated claims, more than 2,000 patient transports under federal scrutiny. A Harris County jury would later sit through 11 days of testimony about ambulance runs that never happened, oxygen that was never administered, and stretcher-level emergencies billed for patients who had walked out to the curb. The sentence would be 16 years. The restitution would be $388,648, and the lifeline he had turned into a billing instrument would be permanently revoked. Quick question before we get into this one. Would you trust the ambulance that pulls up to your front door to bill you honestly for the ride? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you're not subscribed yet, do it now. This channel covers the cases that mainstream outlets quietly bury every single week. Dentist Damian Anugwom was born in 1972 in Owerri, the capital of Imo State in southeastern Nigeria. His father was a civil servant in the state finance ministry. His mother taught primary school and ran a small textile stall on weekends at the relief market. Dennis was the third of 6 children and the first son. In Igbo families with that particular birth order, expectation does not need to be spoken. It is inherited. He attended Federal Government College Okigwe on a state scholarship and was, by every account, a former classmate would later give the Texas attorneys, a quiet and disciplined student who scored in the top 3% on the West African Senior School Certificate Examination. He wanted to be a doctor. His family could not afford a Nigerian medical school, much less an American one. In 1997, at the age of 25, Dennis boarded a Lufthansa flight from Lagos to Frankfurt, transferred to Houston George Bush Intercontinental Airport, and walked through customs with a J-1 student visa, $840 in cash, and 1 suitcase containing 3 suits and a hardcover Igbo English dictionary. He did not go to medical school. He could not afford the prerequisites, and the J-1 paperwork was not built for the path he had in mind. He took the first job he could find, stocking shelves overnight at a Fiesta Mart on the Gulf Freeway, then a second job as a security guard at a Best Western near Hobby Airport. He sent $200 home every month and slept 4 hours a night. Within a year, he had enrolled at Houston Community College, paying in cash, working toward an associate degree in emergency medical services. By 2001, he had earned his EMT basic certification through the Texas Department of State Health Services. By 2003, he was a licensed paramedic. He started at Cypress Creek EMS, then moved to a private interfacility transport company called MedStar Transport, where he ran non-emergency runs between dialysis centers, skilled nursing facilities, and hospital discharge wings across Harris and Fort Bend counties. His annual evaluation in 2005 described him as remarkably calm under pressure, fluent in patient rapport, and an asset to any unit. He was promoted to lead paramedic within 20 months. He married Adaize Onyema in 2006 at the Nigerian Catholic community of Houston. She was a registered nurse at Memorial Hermann Southwest. They bought their first home together in 2008, a 4-bedroom in a new subdivision in Sugarland, with a 30-year fixed mortgage and a small playset already installed in the backyard by the previous owners. Their first son was born in 2009. Their daughter followed in 2011. The Anugwom household was the household every neighbor on the cul-de-sac would later describe, in nearly identical language, as the most quiet, hard-working family on the block. It was during his time at MedStar that Dennis began to understand the business behind the work. He watched dispatchers route calls based on which insurance would pay. He watched billing clerks code interfacility transfers in ways that puzzled him. He asked questions, kept notes in a small spiral pad, and began studying the Texas Medicaid Provider Procedures Manual the way he had once studied for the WASI. He had come to America to save lives. He decided, by the spring of 2010, that he would also build a business. Texas Medicaid is the second largest state Medicaid program in the country. In any given month, it covers roughly 4 million Texans. Children, low-income mothers, the disabled, the elderly poor, and patients in long-term care facilities make up the bulk of the rolls. The program is administered by the Texas Health and Human Services Commission, and the integrity of its claims data is monitored, in part, by the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit inside the Texas Attorney General's office. Ambulance services occupy a small but expensive corner of Medicaid spending. The program reimburses two basic categories: emergency transports, billed under codes like A0427 for advanced life support and A0429 for basic life support, and non-emergency transports, billed under A0428, used to move stable patients between facilities for scheduled care like dialysis or wound therapy. Each base code is paired with a mileage code, A0425, billed per loaded mile. Each transport can also include itemized add-ons for oxygen, for IV setup, for cardiac monitoring, for advanced airway management, for what is called an emergency response surcharge when the trip is dispatched as lights and siren. The codes are how the program speaks. The codes are how the program pays. To bill Texas Medicaid for ambulance transports, a provider must be enrolled, must hold a Texas Department of State Health Services EMS provider license, must staff each transport with appropriately certified personnel, and must maintain a run sheet for every single trip documenting the patient's name, the medical necessity, the level of service delivered, the mileage, the time the rig left, the time it arrived, the equipment used, the medications administered, and the signature of the receiving facility. The run sheet is the source document. The billing claim is supposed to be a faithful translation of that source document into the appropriate codes. The two should match. In theory, the run sheet is the truth, and the claim is the receipt. In practice, the agency that designed the system relies on something it cannot enforce by software alone. It relies on the honesty of the people writing the run sheets and the people writing the claims. There are audits. There are sampling reviews. There are prepayment edits that flag obvious anomalies, like 1,000 transports a month from a single provider, or a sudden spike in advanced life support codes from a company that previously billed mostly basic. But the volume of claims is staggering. The Medicaid Fraud Control Unit in Austin has fewer than 200 staff statewide. They cannot read every run sheet. They cannot ride along on every trip. They rely on patterns. They rely on the way fraud, when it grows, leaves a fingerprint in the data. By the summer of 2011, Damian Anugwom had filed his articles of incorporation in Harris County for a company called Union Healthcare Services LLC, doing business as City EMS. He held a Texas EMS provider license. He had a single Type 3 ambulance, a leased dispatch line, and a contract with one nursing home in Pasadena. The codes were waiting. The system was open. Everything that would follow began there. The first ambulance in the City EMS fleet was a 2007 Ford E450 with 140,000 miles on the chassis, purchased at auction in Conroe for $31,500 and repainted by a body shop in Stafford. The new color was white with a navy stripe and gold lettering. The phone number on the side panel was a Houston 713 line that rang in a leased dispatch office above a tax preparer on Bissonnet Street. For the first 8 months, City EMS operated cleanly. Dennis ran calls himself. He had hired one other paramedic, an EMT basic, and a part-time dispatcher who answered the line from her kitchen in Alief. The company billed Medicaid for non-emergency transports between 2 nursing homes and a dialysis center. The claims were modest. The reimbursements were modest. The run sheets matched. Then came the second ambulance, then the third, then a contract with a 4th nursing home in Southeast Houston, then a 5th in Baytown, then a 6th in Texas City. By the spring of 2013, City EMS had 9 rigs, 22 employees, and a real dispatch center in a leased suite on Beechnut Street. the volume of claims had grown by a factor of 40. And somewhere in the middle of that growth, the run sheets and the claims stopped matching. It started with what auditors would later call upcoding. A patient transported between a nursing home and a dialysis appointment was, by every clinical standard, a basic life support non-emergency transfer, billed under A0428. The reimbursement from Texas Medicaid was, at the time, in the range of $130 per loaded trip. City EMS began coding those same transports as advanced life support emergencies, A0427, reimbursable at nearly 3 times the rate. The run sheets did not change. The patients were the same stable dialysis patients. The crews did not administer IV medications or perform advanced airway interventions. The codes simply rose. Then came what auditors would call unbundling. A standard ambulance transport under Texas Medicaid rules includes certain services in the base reimbursement. The crew is expected to take vitals. The crew is expected to monitor the patient. Those services are not separately billable. City EMS began billing them separately anyway. Cardiac monitoring as a standalone line item on every transport, whether a monitor had been attached or not. Oxygen administration as a standalone line item on every transport, whether oxygen had been delivered or not. IV maintenance as a standalone line item on patients whose run sheets did not document an IV at all. Then came the third layer, the transports that did not occur. Dispatchers were instructed to log certain trips even when the rigs had not moved. A patient name was selected from a list of standing order facility residents. A mileage figure was estimated. A code was entered. A claim was submitted. The receiving facility's signature was sometimes a real signature on a different form altered after the fact. Sometimes it was generated by a stamp kept in a desk drawer at the Beechnut office. The growth was extraordinary. By 2016, Union Healthcare Services was billing Texas Medicaid more than $4 million a year. The fleet had expanded to 17 ambulances. The company occupied a 2-story leased building on the Southwest Freeway. Dennis drove a 2015 Mercedes-Benz GLE. The family had moved into a larger home in a gated section of Sugar Land. His daughter was enrolled at a private school in Missouri City. His son played club soccer in the Houston Dynamo Academy pipeline. Inside the company, the people who saw the numbers stayed quiet. A billing manager who tried to ask about the upcoding pattern in early 2015 was given a raise and reassigned to scheduling. A paramedic who refused to sign run sheets he had not authored was, within 4 months, no longer employed at City EMS. There were always more applicants. There were always more nursing homes. There were also kickbacks. 2 of the largest contracted nursing homes were receiving what their internal records described as patient routing consulting fees from Union Healthcare Services. The fees ranged from $800 to $2,400 per month, paid by company check to an LLC owned by the spouse of the facility's intake coordinator. The contracts produced thousands of billable transports a year. The fees produced a paper trail, and the money laundering. Restaurant investments in 2 storefronts in Stafford. A real estate LLC that purchased 3 rental properties in Missouri City between 2015 and 2018. A consulting subsidiary that received transfers from Union Healthcare Services for services no document in the case file would ever describe. For 5.5 years, the codes climbed. The trips multiplied. The rigs ran. No one noticed. No one checked. Until somebody finally did. The catalyst was not a sting. It was not a whistleblower. It was an audit. In late 2017, an analyst at the Texas Health and Human Services Commission's Office of Inspector General ran a routine quarterly comparison of ambulance providers in the Houston region. The report sorted providers by the ratio of advanced life support claims to basic life support claims. The statewide average for non-emergency interfacility transport was a ratio of roughly 1 ALS claim for every 9 BLS claims. Most providers clustered tightly around that ratio. A few were outliers. One was an extreme outlier. Union Healthcare Services, doing business as City EMS, was billing ALS-level transports at a rate of more than 4 to 1 against BLS. The ratio was not just unusual, It was, in statistical terms, impossible to explain by any plausible patient mix. Either City EMS was running the highest acuity non-emergency fleet in the state of Texas, or City EMS was systematically upcoding. The analyst flagged the file. The file moved to the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit at the Texas Attorney General's office in Austin. The unit assigned an investigator named Kareem Holloway, a former Bexar County prosecutor with 11 years of experience in healthcare fraud. He pulled the provider history. He pulled a sample of 100 claims at random from the City EMS billing record across calendar year 2017. Holloway requested the run sheets for those 100 claims. The request went to City EMS's records custodian. The run sheets were produced. Of the 100 Holloway reviewed, 73 did not support the level of service billed. 41 documented no cardiac monitoring, even though cardiac monitoring had been billed. 26 documented no oxygen administration, even though oxygen had been billed. 11 were for trips on dates. The patient's facility records showed the patient had never left the building. Holloway expanded the sample. 500 claims, then 1,000. The pattern held. The pattern was, in fact, slightly worse as the sample grew. In February of 2018, the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit opened a formal investigation into Union Healthcare Services. The file was assigned a case number. A subpoena was prepared. Search warrants were drafted. The Texas attorneys went quiet. We are about to walk into the investigation, and I need a second of your attention. If a 16-year sentence for ambulance billing fraud sounds steep to you, comment long below. If you think it was earned, comment earned. I read these. And subscribe if you haven't yet. The way this case actually ended is harder than the numbers make it sound. The investigation lasted 19 months. Investigator Kareem Holloway built the case the way Medicaid fraud cases are always built. He started with the claims data because the claims data does not lie. He pulled 6 full years of billing history from Union Healthcare Services. More than 31,000 individual claims. He cross-referenced each one against the run sheets the company had produced under subpoena, against the patient facility records pulled from the nursing homes, against the staffing schedules, against the vehicle GPS logs that City EMS itself had installed in 2014 for insurance reasons and never bothered to disable. The GPS logs were the first piece of physical evidence that turned the case from a billing dispute into a criminal indictment. The logs showed precisely where each rig had been, when, and for how long. Holloway found 147 trips billed to Texas Medicaid for transports that the GPS data placed nowhere near the patient pickup address. He found 82 trips where the ambulance had never moved at all on the date and time of the billed transport. He found the rigs sitting in the Beechnut Bay while the billing system logged them as 8 miles away. He pulled bank records. He pulled tax returns. He found the consulting LLC owned by the spouse of the nursing home intake coordinator. He traced 11 monthly transfers of $1,600 each from Union Healthcare Services to the LLC against a contract that did not exist. He pulled the restaurant investments in Stafford and traced the source funds. He pulled the real estate LLC in Missouri City and traced the source funds. The pattern was consistent. Money moved from Medicaid to City EMS, from City EMS to a personal LLC, from the personal LLC into real estate, restaurants, and brokerage accounts. Then Holloway interviewed former employees. He found 7 who would talk. A former billing clerk who described being told to flag every dialysis transport as ALS, regardless of clinical documentation. A former dispatcher who described being instructed to log ghost runs on patients who had not been transported. A former paramedic who had refused to sign falsified run sheets and had been fired within the month. Each gave a sworn statement. Each said the same thing. The directives came from Damian Anugwom. The smoking gun was not a confession. It was the codes themselves. Upcoding and unbundling are frauds written directly into the claims data. The codes are submitted by the provider. The codes are signed by the provider. The codes are paid by the program. When the run sheets do not support the codes, the run sheets become the prosecution's case. When the GPS logs contradict the codes, the GPS logs become the prosecution's case. When the patient facility records show the patient never left the building on the date of a billed emergency transport, the facility records become the prosecution's case. By September of 2019, the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit had assembled a binder of evidence that ran to more than 4,000 pages. The investigators had identified what they would later describe in their charging memorandum as a 6-year pattern of willful and systematic fraud against the Texas Medicaid program. The case was presented to a Harris County grand jury. The grand jury returned an indictment. The Texas attorneys did not wait for a courtroom to confront him. They went to the house. It was a Tuesday morning in October 2019, 6:22 a.m. The sun was not yet up over the gated subdivision in Sugarland. Dennis was in his kitchen, in a blue cotton robe over pajama pants, drinking the first coffee of the morning and reading the Houston Chronicle on a tablet propped against a fruit bowl. His wife was upstairs. His children were still asleep. The knock at the front door was firm. 3 sets of knuckles, not a neighbor's rhythm. He opened the door to 4 people. 2 were investigators from the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. 2 were special agents from the Texas Attorney General's office. 1 had a folder. 1 had a search warrant. All 4 had badges visible on their chests. The lead investigator was Kareem Holloway. He had been studying Damian Anugwom for 19 months. He knew the face from the corporate registration photograph and from a half-dozen surveillance images. He had never spoken to him. Holloway: Mr. Anugwom, I'm with the Texas Attorney General's office. We have a warrant to search this residence and a separate warrant for the offices of Union Healthcare Services. I need you to step out of the doorway, please. I need you to keep your hands visible. Dennis looked at the folder. He looked at the 4 people standing on his porch. He looked past them at the unmarked Ford Explorer in the driveway and the marked Fort Bend County Sheriff's Unit at the curb. Dennis: Am I being arrested? Holloway: Not at this moment, sir. We have a warrant to search the residence. We'll talk after the search. Dennis stepped out of the doorway. He sat on the front porch bench while 3 of the agents went through his house, and 1 stayed with him on the porch. Dennis: I want to call my attorney. Holloway: You can do that, sir. He did not say anything else for the next 2 hours. He did not deny the company. He did not deny the codes. He did not try to explain. When the agents finally left the property at 8:46 a.m., they took with them 7 banker's boxes, 3 external hard drives, 2 laptops, a corporate ledger bound in red faux leather, and the entire contents of a locked cabinet in the home office that contained 6 years of personal financial records. Dennis sat on the porch for another 20 minutes after they were gone. Then he went inside, woke his wife, and told her, in Igbo, the only sentence she would later be able to repeat in any deposition. Dennis: They have everything. The indictment was unsealed in November of 2019. Dennis Damian Anugwom was charged in Harris County District Court with first-degree felony Medicaid fraud, money laundering, and engaging in organized criminal activity. The case was assigned to the 263rd District Court. His defense attorney was a Houston veteran named Roland Whitaker, a former federal prosecutor with a reputation for taking complex white-collar cases to trial. The defense theory was straightforward. The fraud, if any, was the work of subordinates. The codes had been entered by billing clerks. The run sheets had been signed by paramedics. The dispatch logs had been kept by dispatchers. Damian Anugwom was the owner. The owner had not knowingly directed any of it. The state's theory was simpler. The owner had signed the corporate filings. The owner had signed the Medicaid provider enrollment under penalty of perjury. The owner had personally directed the upcoding pattern and recorded directives to the billing manager. The owner had personally signed the company checks to the Kickback LLC. The owner had personally moved the money into the restaurants and the real estate. The fraud had a name on it. The trial began in May of 2023, after pandemic-era delays that had pushed the docket sideways for nearly 2 years. 11 days of testimony, 27 witnesses for the state, 7 witnesses for the defense. The 7 former employees Holloway had identified testified. Each described the directives. Each described the pattern. Each described the meetings in the second-floor office on the Southwest Freeway, where the codes had been discussed by acuity, not by patient need. The jury deliberated for less than 9 hours. The verdict came back guilty on the lead count of first-degree felony healthcare fraud. Sentencing was set for July of 2023. The pre-sentencing investigation produced a report nearly 200 pages long. It documented the kickback scheme in detail. It documented the money laundering through the Stafford restaurants and the Missouri City real estate. It documented the destruction of internal records during the early months of the investigation. It documented, perhaps most damaging, the pattern of retaliation against the former employees who had refused to participate. Texas does not have federal sentencing guidelines in the same form. First-degree felony healthcare fraud in Texas carries a statutory range of 5 to 99 years. The state argued for 40. The defense argued for 10. Judge Marcia Wendell Brooks read the sentence aloud on a Thursday morning. She first addressed the gallery, where 2 former patients' family members had submitted written victim impact statements, including one from the daughter of an 81-year-old dialysis patient whose name had been billed for 43 emergency transports that her facility records showed never occurred. Judge Wendell Brooks: the defendant did not commit a paperwork crime. The defendant committed a crime against a program that exists to protect the most vulnerable Texans. The defendant treated emergency medical transport, which is in this state and in this country a sacred public trust, as a billing instrument. He turned ambulances into invoices. He turned patients into line items. He turned a system of mercy into a system of personal enrichment. The court has reviewed the financial records. The court has reviewed the kickbacks. The court has reviewed the pattern of intimidation against employees who tried to stop this. The court finds the conduct to be among the most cynical and sustained healthcare fraud schemes the court has presided over. She paused. Judge Wendell Brooks: 16 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Restitution in the amount of $388,648, payable to the Texas Health and Human Services Commission. Permanent revocation of all professional licenses. The defendant is remanded into custody at the conclusion of this hearing. Damian Anugwom was transported that afternoon to the Harris County Jail. He was processed within 72 hours into the Texas Department of Criminal Justice System and assigned, after intake classification, to the Mark W. Stiles Unit in Beaumont, a medium-security state prison roughly 80 miles east of the city where he had built his company. His projected release date, accounting for parole eligibility under Texas state guidelines for first-degree felonies of this class, is sometime in 2035. He will be 63 years old. Union Healthcare Services was dissolved. Its EMS provider license was permanently revoked. Its fleet of 17 ambulances was sold at state auction. The Sugarland home went into foreclosure during the second year of the sentence. The restaurants in Stafford closed within 12 months. The real estate LLC was liquidated to satisfy a portion of the restitution order. His wife filed for divorce in early 2024. His children live with their mother in a smaller home in Missouri City. The boy, now in high school, no longer plays in the Dynamo Academy pipeline. The girl, now in middle school, attends the local public school. Both visit their father once a month at the Stiles Unit. The visits last 2 hours. The conversations are mostly in Igbo. The Texas Medicaid program continues to fund roughly 4 million Texans every month. The Medicaid Fraud Control Unit at the Texas Attorney General's office continues to run quarterly ratio reports on every ambulance provider in the state. The Union Healthcare Services case is now used in training new investigators as a textbook example of how a fraud written into the codes can hide in plain sight for years until someone sorts the data and notices that the ratios do not match the world. That case was infuriating, but the case on the right-hand side is even more outrageous. Click it now.